Hello, hello. Today we are talking about this movie Pig. It's a movie I saw a little bit ago. My expectations going in, I was initially told about this movie. What? My cat's meowing a lot. Someone said it's a movie where Nicolas Cage gets his pig stolen and that it's actually really good. It's one of the movies where Nicolas Cage tries. I would say maybe, oh my gosh, what? Like 20% of movies Nicolas Cage actually gives a shit about, and the rest he's just signing on to for financial reasons and just phones it in from half the world away. But when he tries hard, he's like a really uniquely powerful actor. He's able to give performances that you could never imagine any actor giving, and this is one of the movies that I was told I could see him excel in. It was described to me as a John Wick type movie, which, based on the premise of someone getting their animal stolen or killed or whatever, makes sense. It's kind of like some thriller, suspense, action sort of thing. It's violent and intense, and there's like choreographed fight scenes. This very simple plot of I'm so mad that they took my pig, I am going to action scene everybody in my way. And I was down for that. I like Nicolas Cage. I like to see him put on a really powerful performance. I actually liked John Wick. I watched it not that long ago for the first time, and it was a lot of fun. I don't usually like that kind of movie, but it was well done. And if this was just John Wick with a pig, I was down for that, especially since I was going to the theater to see it with my friends. That seemed like a blast. But I was also pretty skeptical of this description. I looked up the director in the studio, and it really did not seem like they made John Wick type movies. And then I told a friend of mine, my friend who has the best taste in the world, famously his rules are movies shouldn't have anyone going faster than a run. Like nobody, no, faster than a walk. Nobody should be running. Nobody should be shouting. No explosions. No cars driving fast. And he said, "Yeah, this looks good. I'm interested." And there's no way he would be interested if this was an action type movie. So I started thinking, okay, maybe this is some sort of like bleak thriller mystery where it's kind of slow and depressing, but it's still mostly around the suspense of like, where's my pig? Where's my pig? And I was definitely also down for that. I was more than happy with that kind of plot. What are you doing? My cat's up on the windowsill. He's just kind of roaming around right now. And as it turns out, I was right. I was beyond right. This movie is super, super bleak. It's dark, slow, brooding, long shots, and even longer sequences, and it's very, very restrained. Extremely heavy subjects and messaging, unhappy characters, negative developments, a long, grinding tragedy of disappointment. My favorite plot structure of all. And after my friend that I was watching it with that I was watching this movie with said, that was the most depressing piece of media I have ever consumed. And I think it's like top 50 most depressing pieces of media that I've ever consumed, which is saying a lot for me because I actively seek out this kind of movie or book or anime or whatever. I swear to God, this happened. That right near the end, when the credits were rolling, someone in the audience said, I thought it was going to be like a thriller. So apparently this misconception was pretty widespread that just because this is about an animal getting taken away and someone trying to get it back, that this is like a John Wick thriller type movie. I just like seeing people get tricked. I don't know why. It's ultimately harmless, Watching a movie you don't like isn't gonna hurt you. It's funny. And it's really good, too. I think probably a lot of the people, even if they're going in with the wrong expectations, are gonna walk away being pretty moved and pretty affected, because this is an extremely well done movie. Just the sort of movie I love best. It gave me this feeling that I can only describe as heavy and giddy, where the more depressing it is, the more brutal the realizations are, I'm like, I can feel myself like twitching in my seat with like happy excitement because it was just so well done. The performances, the cinematography, the soundtrack, this wonderful collection of really heavy, some of the most like drivingly melancholy classical pieces in the canon. The structuring, it's all fantastic. And it was way funnier than I would have guessed too. Really, really funny. Just this wonderful banter dialogue between the two main characters that is sprinkled in at just the right rate and never becomes obnoxious and never slows down the driving force of the movie. It never feels like you're too comedically relieved. It's just peppered in such that it really hits and it's really, really funny. If that sounds appealing, I give this movie my absolute highest recommendation. I'm very, very impressed with it. But that's it for not spoilers. If this doesn't sound appealing, but you're still kind of curious about this movie, I think this movie is a great example of why I like depressing, slow, negative development type movies. I'm going to talk about that. So if that sounds interesting. But if you do kind of like this movie as well and you want to go into it without spoilers, this is your last chance to cut out. Go watch it. You can find it online now. It's playing in some theaters. It's definitely worth spending the time to see if this is your cup of tea. Okay, let's get into spoiler discussion. First, I want to talk about the idea of restraint. I already said that this movie really impressed me with how restrained it was. I'd say that what impressed me most about this movie. And that's not a quality you'd ascribe to a Nick Cage movie. I generally classify autorial decisions into one of two categories. There's stuff that makes the text better for the ideal consumer. That when you're producing the work, you have someone in mind, not an individual, not even a demographic, but someone whom you see as the ideal consumer of your text, someone who is going to wholeheartedly appreciate and put in the effort to make meaning of your text, someone to whom you don't have to compromise anything, that is just one-to-one with your vision, understanding it, appreciating it, enjoying it. Then there's decisions that expand the size of the audience who likes it enough. Things to broaden the scope of the film, things that wouldn't make it any better for that ideal consumer, but would open up the number of people that could fall into the category of people that like the movie. And this is a massive oversimplification of how the creative process works, obviously. There's so many other aspects to why decisions are made. Not everything is made with the audience in mind, which is one of the great things about why did I write this word if I can't pronounce it? Autorial works that are very based on like a particular author's vision. But I think this is an interesting way to think about things, even if it is maybe a little elitist, pretentious, because of course you're always putting yourself in the former category and going, yes, I am the ideal consumer. I am the one that understands everything. And things that I don't like about this movie, things that are made to simplify it or make it more accessible or compromise on the emotional intensity of it, that's for the rubes, that's for the plebeians. So it's a little elitist, it's a little pretentious, I'm not going to deny that. But I think it is interesting to view works through this lens and try to judge, what was the intent here and there and stuff. And I feel like I can tell exactly when they decided this movie had enough of the latter, that is, expanding the scope, and could go all in on the former and make a totally uncompromised movie. So the first line of the whole movie had me a little skittish, because Nick Cage is out there with his pig. The pig digs up a truffle, and he goes, "You found a truffle, girl?" And it's well written. I'm not trying to say that this stuff is bad, that this stuff is like shoddy, that this stuff is made without direction. And this is impressive, that saying "you found a truffle girl" encodes a lot of characterization and a lot of information about what's happening to the viewer just in one line. But I found it very, very on the nose, and I was like, is this because they were worried some audiences wouldn't know what the heck he was doing out there following this pig around? They really just wanted to establish like the language. So I consider that a decision made to expand the scope of the audience, because it is kind of out of character and out of tone for the movie to have a line like this. And then the structuring of the first major developments of the movie is very, very tight. It's basically as soon as possible they introduce the major driving action, which is that the pig gets taken. The pig gets taken about 10 minutes in. And again, I think this is done out of consideration for making the movie accessible. Everyone is going in knowing this is the movie where Nick Cage gets his pig stolen. They're going to get that pig stolen before everybody gets bored and walks away, right? And then the climax of the first act is them infiltrating an underground fight club. There's three major acts into the movie. They even have little title cards, and at the end of the first one is a pretty violent, pretty intense scene where they're in this underground fight club, and Nick Cage gets the shit beaten out of him. At this point, I was pretty impressed with everything that had been happening so far. But I didn't like this. I was like, oh, fucking oh. Because in my mind, I was thinking about John Wick still. And in John Wick, if you haven't seen it, the first, 25 minutes is just establishing the character. It's just showing how much he loves the dog, the connection between the dog and his dead wife, all this stuff. So that when the dog gets killed, you know that they're just going to slam on the brakes. And the rest of the movie pretty much is just action. Action or conversations that drive the action. And I was like, oh, geez, is this the same structure? Is it from here on in going to be a lot of fight scenes, a lot of sneaking around, a lot of going to mysterious hidden places? I don't want that. I wanted more, moping around. I wanted more depression. But they pivoted from that point on in the exact opposite direction. I think they really did have this mentality of, okay, we've made it accessible enough. Anybody who's going to be interested in this movie, we've given them enough that they can invest themselves in it. We've shown some intense scenes. We've really established the motivation of the whole movie. You understand what he's doing, what truffles are, all this stuff. Now there's no more of that. No more action. No more exposition. No more hype. Unless it's integral to the plot or naturally justified by the characters, that is, every plot point of exposition also has to serve as characterization of the explainer. That it's not just info dumping so that you understand what's happening, it's establishing characters by having them learn things from one another. And I kept expecting going into the movie I expected certain things. And I felt really, really happy when I realized that none of these scenes were going to come to pass. By the end, I was almost cracking up, just imagining this alternate movie. A scene where someone talks about the appeal of truffles in a passionate monologue. It's the jewel of the earth. Have you ever really smelt one? Really smelt one? As it wafts through the restaurant, and all eyes turn to those tiny little flakes. A really artistic, passionate monologue to make you understand why people are so fanatic about truffles. And we actually saw a trailer in the theater for this movie called The Truffle Hunters, which is a documentary on truffle finding people. And maybe that's the sort of thing that's in that movie. I want to watch that too. I'm planning on watching that as well. It sounds like fun. Another scene where, do you know how much this is worth? $30,000 a pound. That's the year's salary of one of the wait staff out there. Are you telling me that you won't let me have your pig? This sort of bullshit. Easy to picture, right? A scene where Nick Cage talks about why his pig means so much to him, and in the same scene he talks about how much he misses his wife. Oh my god, am I about to try to do a Nick Cage impersonation? I can't do that. He goes, my wife's dead. I remember. No, let's try to do this. Let's try to channel him. I remember when. No, I can't do it. I remember when my wife died, and I just felt like I had nothing. And then I met this pig, and her spark, the way she so enthusiastically dug into the earth, I realized that for some things out there, life is still worth living. If I could just find the joy that my wife felt when she played the guitar and what my pig felt when she digs into the earth, I realized that my wife isn't really gone if I had those feelings inside of me. That's not what he sounds like. But that kind of scene or any sort of flashback. They talk a lot about Nick Cage used to be this super respected head chef. He had this successful restaurant and all this stuff that they could easily show. They could easily have a scene in the past that establishes all this stuff really well and shows him and his wife together and stuff. I can picture these really vividly because it's the default mode of filmmaking. It's the sort of scenes that you would see in any other like parallel universe version of Pig. And all of these would expand the audience that would like this movie. It would make the movie better for many people. And I don't think any of these scenes would be bad. Like, I'm kind of making fun of them, but these are like good scenes that can be well acted, that can have like interesting points and information, can drive characterization, can invest you in the story. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just that they're not necessary. And the restraint, when I can see these possible compromises being ignored, when I could see that they easily could have thrown in a scene that would have made it much more clear to a bunch of people, much more interesting to a bunch of people, and they're like, no, we don't need to. We don't need to. It's obvious we could, but we don't need to. That just really impresses me. That to me speaks to a deep autorial intent that can really resonate with me. Something opens up when you realize you're seeing this unfettered manifestation of creative will, that someone has not been compromised at all when they brought the vision to bear. Something opens up that it can really deeply resonate with you because you know it's like this person-to-person connection. Okay, so what is this vision that they wanted to bring to bear, that they did not really compromise on much at all, that everything else is in service of? Well, it's that the world is an arbitrary, meaningless place defined by negative coincidence. Any forces of meaning in this world, such as people knowing Nick Cage's reputation and acting on it, that, you know, throughout the movie, when people recognize him and they know of his past, they're like, oh, chef, head chef, you know, sure, I'll do you this favor, sure, I'll introduce you to this person. Nick Cage in the big climactic scene is able to recreate the meal that Amir's father had so many years ago. Amir is constantly listening to this classical music podcast that talks about the appeal of classical music and how it kind of elevates the human condition. All of this stuff is obviously insufficient, but none of it is able to kind of save the trajectory of the film. Likewise, any forces of effort in the world, like when Nick Cage shows his mettle and his commitment by getting the shit punched out of him by some guy in the underground fight club. Amir has to gather courage to confront his dad. It's been this barrier throughout his entire life that he can't stand up to his dad, and in the end, he sort of does. Even the effort of like collecting truffles, this kind of core activity that drives all of the like economics of the movie and a lot of characters' motivations and stuff. All of this effort is also insufficient to change the nihilistic trajectory of the film. And even forces of kindness, the way that Nick Cage is able to go gather things from former friends to make the meal, Amir's camaraderie, at first being really skeptical of Nick Cage, but by the end being his number one advocate and helping him a lot. Amir's dad trying to spare Nick Cage the truth, not telling him about what happened to his pig, but instead trying to buy him off and kind of browbeat him into leaving without learning the tragic truth. These are perhaps the most pointless of all. These have almost hilariously no consequence in being able to undo the painful truths of the movie. In the end, the pig was already dead. The pig was dead since about 10 minutes into the movie. The wife was already dead. She died long before the movie even started. Amir's mom kills herself anyways, despite learning about the power that the meal had over her to improve her life for a bit. And eventually, as Nick Cage says in one of the best monologues in the film, everyone is just going to get killed in an earthquake, tidal wave, volcano combo. Yay! But then there is a reciprocal side. That despite all of this nihilistic messaging, which Nick Cage seems to have pre-internalized from before the film, that it defines his character when we meet him, there is another side, which is we don't get a lot of things to really care about. And this is the tagline on the poster. first I was kind of like, because I thought it was going to be about the pig. But at some point, this is my vision of the movie before I saw it. Hey, stop killing my men. Why are you going to such lengths? It's just a pig. And he goes, we don't get a lot of things to really care about. It's almost hilarious how poorly I can impersonate Nick Cage. I can't hear his voice in my head unless I'm actually listening to him. Anyways, but in the movie, it really, really hits. The context of it, the monologue he's delivering, and how restrained it was that he doesn't go, we don't get a lot of things to really care about. For me, it was my pig. The restraint. Even in this nihilistic world, we can keep living if we find things we can lose ourselves in. When we lose ourselves in something, that is how we actually create ourselves in this world. This is how we actually manifest ourselves to other people, is through our intent, our passion intent. And the important thing is to find things that are authentic to yourself. So a major theme of this movie is authenticity. And it's really nicely summarized by the speech when he goes to the pretentious gastro place and completely chews out the chef. Really sums up this movie's attitudes on authenticity. That was one of the biggest banger scenes in the whole movie, and while I was watching it, it called to mind a similar scene in another movie that I absolutely love, The Great Beauty. And I realized that actually a whole lot of this movie is kind of a Great Beauty type movie. So I guess this movie is like Ratatouille plus John Wick plus The Great Beauty. What a wonderful formula. The lesson seems to be, though, is that these movies are kind of insufficient. That the things that succeed in these movies, be it the overwhelming deliciousness of food and the connection of food and memory, which saves the day in Ratatouille. John Wick, it's like if you action scene enough people, it'll all work out, sort of, kind of. And The Great Beauty, it's far too long to get into the moral messages of that, but that there is some sort of sublimity in art and in creation that can save you from the otherwise undeniable and nihilistically overwhelming forces of like the inevitability of death and stuff. It's really funny to me, especially since everyone going in thought it was going to be a John Wick type movie, of how anti-revenge this movie is. Right from the start, he learns that it was the meth heads that kidnapped his pig. And he doesn't care, he just wants to find out who they sold the pig to. And even at the end, when he finds out that the meth heads killed the pig, there's no indication at all that he's gonna go, like, fuck with them, that he's ever gonna see them again. There's no point. There's no revenge. And throughout the movie, there's all these little anecdotes where somebody wrongs somebody else, and they're just kind of like, well, shit. What am I gonna do? Like in the gastropub, Nick Cage fired that guy. And Nick Cage is, like, super disappointed in that guy. But there's no sense of, like, revenge. There's no sense of reciprocation, even. It's just this feeling of, like, there's no point to wasting our efforts on that. We just gotta freaking keep going. Life is hard enough as is. And then in the climactic eating scene where, like, Ratatouille, he eats the meal that he could remember from all those years ago, and he's overwhelmed by the sensation of memory. But unlike Ratatouille, where the critic is just transported to this dreamy, innocent place, and completely 180s his attitude on the restaurant and becomes their greatest benefactor and supporter, instead here he gets outraged that Nick Cage would try to use this, like, kind of trick on him, and he's, like, so pained by vividly remembering his catatonic, basically dead wife. And just, like, is forced to confront his monstrousness and gets super pissed off at Nick Cage. It completely inverts the scene from Ratatouille. It's fantastic. There's all this idea of, like, quasi-life in the movie. Like, there's a lot of lines near the start where Amir is saying, hey man, I'm your only lifeline. You could die right now, and only I would know. If I didn't come check up on you and buy your truffles and stuff, you could just stroke out one day, and that's it. Just this sense that he's almost in this, like, Schrodinger's box of alive or dead, that he has no impact on the world besides through Amir. The pig, of course, was dead the whole time. Amir's mom is only sort of dead. She's in a comatose state. They're changing her bedpan and stuff. We see the empty tomb of Nick Cage's character in the mausoleum. Just this sort of sense that even if you're living, you might not actually be alive. That it really wants to reinforce these images of whether you're alive or whether you're dead in a physical sense is much less important than some other quality. In this sense, it's actually a very existentially stirring film. Beside, not just being bleak and nihilistic and stuff. A message of your life is lacking in a quality that affects all others, which is this authenticity of self. But if you can attain this, you might know an inner peace that makes irrelevant all other worldly concerns. And you can kind of see the other side of this at the very start of the movie, where Nick Cage is living contently out in the woods with his pig, eating simply, rustling up truffles, ignoring Amir and not even responding to him. It shows that there is like a way to attain this. It's like fragile. It might be compromised from what you really want. It might be like bathed in tragedy. It might be full of sadness as well. But you will stop living in this half-dead state of constantly wanting and never being satisfied. And Nick Cage only progresses through this movie when he evokes an idea of authenticity. Like, all of the stages that allow him to get closer to the truth of what happened to his pig all happen when he shows that he is attaining this quality of authenticity, and the people standing in his way have like forgotten how authentic things can be. So like at the Fight Club, he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna stand here and take these punches. That's how much I'm like living my life. Or when he's at the gastropub and he just completely owns the guy, and it's like, yeah, you know what, like, you kind of deserve to move forward in your quest here. Like, so this is certainly something that is supported on every level, that this is the lesson of the movie, I guess. All right, so if you want to watch a lot of Keith's YouTube channel, you might have wondered, why do you like this bleak stuff so much? Why do you like to suffer while you watch things? This is kind of a consistent theme when I talk about my favorite movies and stuff. You can watch my 1.5 hour Wonder Egg finale video to find out. Just kidding, it doesn't really explain anything like that in there. More just that I like this stuff, and that Wonder Egg failed to be this sort of stuff. That it was just edgy without being bleak, basically. But what do I actually like about bleak stuff? There's this really mysterious, giddy feeling I get when I watch really bleak things. I mentioned this before. The heaviness, bleakness combo feeling. I don't know how to describe it. I haven't heard anyone else talk about feeling like this. It's I don't know, maybe I'm just like deranged. Part of it, I think, is that it's the sense that the text really understands this like ultimate nihilism that I have also felt, but have been unable to articulate, but has felt undeniably true and important. At the end, I am not like a religious person. I'm not like a spiritual person. I hold no sense of supernatural, transcendental meaning to anything. I genuinely think that life is like arbitrary, emerged incidentally from entirely material conditions, so that there is no actual meaning or point to life whatsoever. And I say all this, but it fails to articulate the true feeling of nihilism underneath it. That those are certainly necessary for this feeling, but they're not sufficient to really believe and feel the meaninglessness of life. Which is not a feeling that I have all the time. Most of the time, that's a feeling kind of hidden from me. It's only in like depressive episodes or in really deep introspection or something that I kind of tap into that feeling. And when I watch something, when I read a text or watch a text or whatever, that taps into that like resonates that part of myself, it feels like I'm being kind of like validated, I suppose, on some very, very deep level. And there's so yeah, we could call this ontological depressive realism. If you haven't heard of the term depressive realism, it's the idea that this is a kind of a controversial idea, but there's studies that have shown that depressed people have more realistic predictions and readings of situations and stuff, the example I can always think of is like depressed people are much, much less likely to underestimate like the steepness of a hill. They did some sort of like trial that depressed people in many senses are closer to seeing the world as it is than non-depressed people. It's awfully convenient for me to be saying as a person suffering from chronic depression, but to take it even further to this idea of an ontological depressive realism, that you understand not just the lay of the land physically or socially or whatever, but you understand the ontology of the universe, the actual foundations of life and why existence came to be. That you understand that best when you're depressed. um, yeah, it's not that this viewpoint is necessarily super articulated in the movie. It comes quite close, you know, Nicolas Cage talking about how we're all gonna die in the earthquake, tidal wave, volcano combo. But it really resonates with that feeling inside of me. And I think beyond just the fact that it resonates, there's a really a feeling of relief and release when you can really tap into that deepest nihilism and accept it. The stress of expectation for life is replaced with an acceptance that we are ontologically doomed. And in this moment, even the fear of death falls away. You can believe that or not. I don't know if I can even say that super confidently. It's not like I'm, you know, a cancer patient or something that really has to confront their own death. But that's what it feels like. It feels like in those moments you can accept even your own death with open arms. And that's what I really feel like in the trenches of super depressing media. I feel this cathartic, warm release feeling of like, it's right, this really doesn't matter. I really don't have to give a shit about any of this. Things will just happen as they are. And some variation of this feeling, some giddiness, I also get from like cringe comedies, from media that talks about like discomfort, stress, stuff like Safdie Bros movies, anxious movies, like low-key horror movies and stuff that are all just about building up a sense of anxiety. I love all of those. All of those give me the same sort of giddy feeling. So there is something else going on there. It's not just about this like nihilistic perspective. But it's weird because in real life I hate all these things. I hate when conversations get awkward. I avoid confrontation. I avoid stress in my real life so much. So it's almost like a way, in the same way that I wouldn't want to have a depressive episode in real life because that sucks. It's fucking terrible. But that I really enjoy media that calls upon those feelings in like a safe way. It's something like that. It's some sort of safe release of these fundamental feelings. But within the inner darkness, there is an innermost light. And another feeling that comes through in depressive media for me a lot is the significance of the text existing in itself. That is, despite the bleak meaninglessness of the text messaging, the author still put in the effort to create the text. This is something I think about very often because I listen to, mostly I think of this in the context of like noise music and stuff, where you really feel like you are bearing witness to an artist's breakdown, that they are unleashing the most primal, dissatisfied, excuse me, horrific feelings within themselves onto record. And, you know, in many cases, these artists end up committing suicide or doing other extreme things. And you can tell the authenticity, of course, from this like devotion, from the fact that they really could not escape the message they were delivering was true. And yet they still put in the effort to deliver it, right? Take like Joy Division. You listen to Joy Division albums, you read the lyrics, you're like, damn, Ian Curtis really was just on the brink this entire time. And yet he still made the effort to put out this music. even in situation, yeah, where the author later killed themselves, the most reliable indicator of a banger work. I can't believe I put that in there. I forgot I put that in there. This is a stupid thing to say. That's like a very dumb joke. I don't know. Is it even a joke? Do I actually believe that? Like I talk about an elephant sitting still. Oh yeah, he killed himself after, so you know it's a banger. Oh, what's wrong with me? But even in those situations, the work represents some desire to carry the torch forward, even if the torch is made of darkness, even if it's a negative message, even if the thing they're trying to convey beyond their own life is meaningless, you might as well off yourself. There's still this effort, this artistic, creative effort being made. If this depressive ontology resonates as true, they still made the effort to release something. It reflects a potential in your own life to find something that meaningful. That if you're feeling totally bleak, if you feel like there's no point, you have very little to live for, you're just kind of farting around and passing time, something that I'm sure we all feel from time to time, you can think of the fact that people made these huge depressive masterpieces as evidence that some force could take hold of you as well, that you could live on, that you could put in the effort to make something like this. From here, you can discover a great beauty that might not be false, superficial, or irrelevant. And this attitude is in the plot of the movie itself. Nick Cage making the meal, listening to his late wife's recording, the simple life of his pig, the entire lifestyle that he had before the movie starts. These works where the potential of transcendental creation lurks always feel my heart whole. That they're about people struggling through this, people confronting the meaninglessness of their lives. But there's this lurking sense that if they're able to create something, they're able to make this great beauty. This is what the great beauty is about too, obviously. That it transcends all of this. That they could now live a life with an unimaginable wholeness. So let's talk about these beautiful things in Pig. That the director, despite wanting to make this super depressing movie, was able to bring to the world. The characterization of the Nick Cage character is excellent. I've just been calling him Nick Cage. I don't remember what his character is called. Robin something. Some characters call him Rob. But this, I was so impressed. At first you think, oh, it's like that John Wick model. The secret expertise and renown. Seizes opportunities. There's this just general competence. He's always on point, on the ball. We only kind of see it at his distance. There's no inner monologue that explains how he knows all this stuff. Just kind of like in awe as he effortlessly handles situation after situation. And I think they kind of trick you into thinking it's going to be like this in the opening sequences, like especially when they go to the underground fight club and Amir is like, "Who are you? How did you know that?" And I was like, again, this is when I was kind of like, uh-oh. But instead, okay, no, never mind. I have a beef with this part. This is one of the few things in the movie that I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. He was this highly respected head chef at a nice, implied to be pretty upper-class restaurant. How would he know about this stuff? Was he invited before? Before he rose up in the ranks to be this head chef, was he like a busboy that would go and fight in the fight club? There's no indication of that. His relationship with the guy that runs it seems to be that they used to be peers. There's no sense of like, I remember when you were like a young upstart. Of course, the film would have the restraint not to have dialogue like that. But it just seemed like they really wanted to include some action-y type scene in the first sequences, and they chose this, and that later it doesn't really make any sense. I think it was, honestly, what it was mostly for is so that Nick Cage could look really beaten up and bruised and bloody through the whole movie, which was a nice touch. I do think that was really well done, but the scene is kind of nonsense. I guess, it also shows, he wants his pig so badly he's gonna get brutalized. He's gonna stand there and take all these punches. But every other scene in the movie is also about that. They could have done anything else to establish the same thing in his character. Anyways, but what you learn is that Nick Cage isn't like the John Wick type secret competent character. He's just kind of like a weirdo. It's just the sort of person that would have excelled in what he did. That he's like this virtuoso chef. He's capable of finding these beautiful truffles way out in the woods, living the secluded lifestyle. He's able to run a restaurant and bring out the best in his staff and remember every meal he served, remember his entire clientele, remember everybody that he worked with and all these details about them. That's not somebody who's like slick and cool. That's like a weirdo. And I love that kind of character. Probably my favorite scene, maybe in the entire movie. I don't know. It's a very little scene, but I probably made some like shrill noise in the audience, where the baker that he's getting the loaf from for the meal offers him a pastry. This is at his old restaurant, which became a bakery after, because his sous chef, I guess, was this baker that. Anyways, she offers this pastry to him. He takes it. He reaches for another one to give to Amir. He looks at it. He sets it back down and takes another one that he thinks is better. Like, just that little window into like how he must have been as a chef. Not explicit at all. And not like so endearing in a way that he's just this kind of like awkward weirdo that silently is like, no, this one's better. Oh, it's so good. It's just such masterful characterization. The idea of building this character and presenting him in such a deeply empathetic light, the broadening of your empathetic horizons, that you see this weird mountain man rummaging around in the dirt, and by the end of the movie, through such subtle characterization, you understand him so much better. This is what storytelling is for. More than anything else, I think storytelling is about broadening your empathetic horizons. That you understand what is behind people, why people are the way they are. Yeah, just this kind of character. I just love it so much. And they brought him through in such a wonderful way. Other good stuff I liked. Cinematography is fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. The splendor of nature, the artistry of cuisine, distant opulence, dirty, forgotten places. They do this really excellent thing where some settings are first presented as hostile. What? He's gonna jump up, maybe? I don't know. It's Roman. They first feel kind of like hostile and foreboding. You don't really understand what's going on there, but as you learn their context, suddenly they feel warm and inviting, both through just recontextualization, but also very interesting little cinematographic choices. I noticed things like they'll focus more on close character action when you're like invited into the scene. Things like that. Things come alive when authenticity manifests into them. And this is true for the performances too, like the gastropub chef guy, that when he starts talking and remembering his dream of running a very traditional British pub with pub fare, you can tell there's an entire layer that just kind of slaws off of him, and he comes alive in a way that he hadn't been before. Camaraderie between Amir and Nick Cage. The excellent dialogue writing allows this to happen without breaking this depressive spell that it is in a lot of ways. The central plot is about them becoming friends and learning to understand each other and learning to support each other better. And yet it doesn't break the spell of nihilism and futility, just because the dialogue is so excellent. It's never over the line. The restraint, it's never sentimental. It's never saccharine. It's just like two people genuinely coming to understand each other while still authentically working in their own interests. Another example of the text reflecting the virtues of its creation. Think about Nick Cage as an actor. Think about everything you know about him. Think about how the director was able to get this performance out of him. There must have been such a deep intimacy and understanding, and just thinking about the process behind this movie that allowed this movie to be made, I think is very beautiful in and of itself. point is that all of this is insufficient against the ontological darkness, but it creates a small light of beauty that can carry us through our life. And here, what comes to mind immediately is a passage in this famous interview Stanley Kubrick gave Playboy at kind of the height of his career. I think of it often. I think it's very beautifully written. You see it all the time in like inspirational quote Instagram accounts, which whatever. But in its full context, I think it really speaks to the attitude in making films like this. So we're evoking Kubrick, so you know this is a really good movie. So the interviewer says, if life is so purposeless, do you feel it's worth living? Kubrick says, yes, for those who manage somehow to cope with our mortality, the very meaninglessness of life forces a man to create his own meaning. Children, of course, begin life with an untarnished sense of wonder, a capacity to experience total joy at something as simple as the greenness of a leaf, but as they grow older, the awareness of death and decay begins to impinge on their consciousness and subtly erode their joie de vivre, a keen enjoyment of living, their idealism, and their assumption of immortality. As a child matures, he sees death and pain everywhere about him and begins to lose faith in the ultimate goodness of man. But if he's reasonably strong and lucky, he can emerge from this twilight of the soul into a rebirth of life's elan, enthusiastic and assured of vigor and liveliness. I don't know if these are editorial things to explain the French terms, but whatever. Both because of and in spite of his awareness of the meaninglessness of life, he can forge a fresh sense of purpose and affirmation. He may not recapture the same pure sense of wonder he was born with, but he can shape something far more enduring and sustaining. The most terrifying fact about the universe is not that it is hostile, but that it is indifferent. And this is Nihilism 101. But if we can come to terms with this indifference and accept the challenges of life within the boundaries of death, however mutable man may be to make them, our existence as a species can have genuine meaning and fulfillment. However vast the darkness, we must supply our own light. Banger! What a beautifully articulate discussion on filmmaking, on existentialism, on life in general. So, obviously I like this movie a lot. What does this mean for me? I don't know. I think this could be one of the new classics of the cruel, ironical watch suggestion. This is something that I find infinitely funny, especially when I'm around my aforementioned friend that likes these sorts of movies too. Oh, what do you feel like doing? You want to watch something? Let's watch Turin Horse! Ooh, let's watch Turin Horse! Yeah, let's watch Turin Horse. Sometimes we even put on Turin Horse and you watch the horse. Everybody's going, no, we're not watching Turin Horse. Turin Horse. Uncut Gems is another one. Ooh, let's watch Uncut Gems! Let's watch Uncut Gems! Everybody hates it. I don't know why this is so funny to me. I guess because it's like I'm invincible in this regard. There's no counterplay. What could they put on that I don't want to watch? I'm just a glutton. I'll watch anything. I think this might be one of the best in this category yet, because Pig is so fun to say. Ooh, let's watch Pig. Oh, did you guys forget? We're gonna watch Pig today. Look, it's Pig. I'm already playing it. Look, see, it's the pig. Oh, it's not that funny. It's just really fun for me. Ooh, let's watch Pig. And maybe some of my giddiness in watching this movie is that I realized, I can bully people with this movie for years. For years, I'm gonna be telling them to watch Pig. I was really happy that this is the first movie I saw in theaters after the long COVID hiatus. I used to really like going to movies in theaters. I'd go probably at least a couple times a month. I'd go into Toronto for special showings and stuff. And I missed it. I really missed it. It's something very, very special. And this was a beautiful, beautiful return. My cow's making a weird noise. I thought he was like getting into something. It's fine. He was just looking at himself. Man, it's so great. The hypnotism, the collective energy, that feeling that you can feel the tension of everyone around you building up and breaking. Will this start an era of Keith's YouTube channel movie reviews? Nah, it's probably not. There's a lot of effort. Uh, this was like a good jumping off point to talk about a lot of stuff that I had been meaning to try to articulate before. But most movies, it's gonna be like more about the movie itself, and that's a lot of effort. That's a lot to talk about. And there's a lot of things that are in movies. There's so many things that I didn't cover at all. Other themes, other plot points, performances that I really liked. Because you can only talk about so much, you know. Um, Even just watching the movie is effort. It's long. But please stay tuned for summer 2021 anime reviews. There will be so many shows, so many takes, so many scores. Seasonal anime will never die. It will never be over. That is the true meaning of my life. Seasonal anime.